thank you all for joining us this evening. My name is Rochelle. So a lot of you have heard me through email or through text and never heard my name pronounced. It's Rochelle. I live in Shelby Township, and I am the operations and training lead at the Michigan Education and Justice Coalition. But even more than that, I am a Macomb County mom and aunt. My kids go to Utica schools while my nieces and nephews go to Chippewa Valley schools. I'm a former educator myself, um, that has, I don't know how many aunts and aunts and sisters and cousins that are teachers. So education is super important to myself and my family. So that's about me. Um, we're going to give the candidates a chance to introduce themselves. But before we get to that, let's just kind of talk about why we're here. Um, I want to learn about who's running for the school board in Chippewa Valley schools. Chippewa Valley schools hold a special place in my heart. Like I said, my nibblings all go to Chippewa Valley schools. My nephew just graduated from Chippewa Valley High School and is now at Macomb Community College. And you know how you have those nieces and nephews that are like your honorary kids? He's my honorary kid. He's my baby. Even though my sister birthed him, he's mine. Um, and she knows, and that's okay. I'm hers, if that makes any sense to you all. I am 19 years behind my siblings, so she treats me like I'm her kid too. So the other opportunity, we'll hopefully hear from our candidates tonight and hear from them about how they feel about issues in Chippewa Valley schools and hear their solutions. And then I always want to encourage you, because it is that season, to encourage folks to get out and vote. And we want to make sure that people are bringing their friends to the polls. To me, that is a super important civic duty that we all have. I have a spreadsheet that I'm going to drop in the chat. And the reason I'm dropping it in the chat is just so I can know who's here. Some of you have RSVP'd with me and some of you were invited by other folks, and that's okay. That's fantastic. But I just kind of want to know who you are, if I can get my chat to come up. And I will follow up with the recording and the slides afterwards. So if you want to share it with people who weren't able to make it, you can do that. And you all should be able to edit the sheet. So just let me know if it's on the right setting. We all have those fun moments where we have Google documents that are not open to the right people. Right permissions. So like I said, I work with the Michigan Education Justice Coalition, and I want to introduce some of you who are new to our organization, what we're about. And we are a statewide coalition of organizations working for education justice. And at the time of our founding in 2013, we were the only community labor partnership working on education justice issues, because we walk hand in hand with our labor sisters and brothers, especially teachers, because we believe that teachers' working conditions are our kids' learning conditions, right? And we are all parents, students, community members, educators, and that we believe that Michigan owes its students healthy and healing public schools that are adequately funded, is my other caveat to that. Some of you I've met before, so you know who I am and what the Michigan Education Justice Coalition does. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out, put stuff in the chat. It's a super informal candidate forum that we're having this season, or this evening, mostly because it's a Wednesday evening in election season and I'm tired. For those of us who work with get out the vote efforts, you know what I'm talking about. We're tired at this point. And I get energy from talking to folks. So I like those informal groups where folks can talk and feel like they can raise their hand and contribute. So with all that said, these are the things that the Michigan Education Justice Coalition, when I talk about adequate funding, this is what I mean. What's at stake with public schools in Michigan? Michigan is currently in the bottom, I think 10, as far as of 50 states. If you hear the dogs growling, I'm sorry, it's their witching hour. They're playing. we are in the bottom 10 as far as growth for education funding in the state, or in all 50 states. So we're 50, well, we're 50 out of 50 in education funding growth since 1995. The sharpest decline happened in the early 2000s with the recession that impacted all districts, or all states, but Michigan seems to have not rebounded as well as others. Funding for at-risk students has fallen by 60% per student. Facilities funding is unfair for both students and taxpayers. And just overall, the Michigan Education Justice Coalition has partnered with some fantastic researchers that have found that we're about $4.5 billion short of where we should be for adequately funding our schools. And again, that's just adequately funding. We're not talking about like super fantastic, amazing schools. We're $4.5 billion short of adequate. So when I am in Lansing talking to folks, I'm always reminding them that the Michigan education that I received in the 90s and the early 2000s is not something that exists for our kids today. And it's mostly because we have made a decision to not address revenue and funding for our schools. It kind of sucks. 90% of schools in Michigan are considered underfunded in that adequacy that we talked about. And again, these are like nonpartisan researchers that came up with this number. We were the last in the 50 states. We've made a little bit of a bump, I think, in the past 2 years. But the most recent data that we really have, it says that we were last in school funding growth. And again, we're $4.5 billion short. And that doesn't include facilities, because a lot of our rural schools and a lot of our older school districts have inadequate funding for their facilities because of the way Michigan funds facilities. Any questions about that? Any first impressions? It's a pretty, when I give people that $4.5 billion number, they tend to be shocked. And I was shocked when I first looked at the research.
It's just hard to imagine. Sorry, my dogs are playing with a squeaky toy. So,
Dog witching
hard
hour.
to imagine where the money would come from when there's so many different initiatives going on.
You know, I am going to quote a Republican on this. We were in Lansing a couple of weeks ago, and oh God, I forget. I know what district she's in. I can picture it on the map. And I will probably, by the end of the study, we were asking about where we were going to get the $300 million that we were asking for 31AA, which is mental health and school school safety. And when she was asked where would the funds come from, and she goes, the corporate taxes. And that was a Republican that said that. So it's a nonpartisan issue. I think that we realize that our schools are just sort of grossly underfunded. So that's to just let you know that no matter where folks fall on the political spectrum, we all recognize that it's a problem, right? And so one of the things that we did when we were coming up with that $4.5 billion number in research from our research is we actually asked parents and students and teachers, so all of the stakeholders sort of in education, what they want to see funded in our schools. And so you can see it's sort of broken down by very important each bar. So you can kind of see there are, mental health funding. A lot of folks consider that very important, right? Or I mentioned facilities, about half of the folks who responded said that facilities were important. ELL means English language learners. And the other thing that I find very interesting in this number is what they thought wasn't important, which was testing and policing. A very big chunk of folks said that's not super important. Um, and I think, especially in these post-COVID years, we're seeing that mental health in particular. I honestly, I think if we ask that the same question today, that number might be even bigger of folks who think that that's very important. We see that mental health treatment in schools increases the safety of our buildings and for our students. So that's that. I think the last time we pulled this data was like 2022. So how about you all here? What are some things that you all as parents and community members in Chippewa Valley, when you look at this list, what do you think? What stands out to you is like super important? Anyone want to talk about technology? I hear some things about technology a lot from my nieces and nephews. Anyone else? I love as a teacher, I look at the curriculum. I'm like, oh, that's a good number. A lot of people thought curriculum was very important.
I think
I think
curriculum is the number one. Test scores, getting back to basics, um, all the NGOs and everything that's involved in the schools. We need to get rid of that. We need to get rid of big bureaucracies, focus on the teachers and the students. I think we've gotten away from that. They cut everything for you guys and our students, the teachers and our students, but they give to their little social ideals. And I think that needs to stop.
That's interesting. That's interesting. An interesting thought. When you say curriculum, what do you think? You say it's very important. Is that like your number one issue? Was that Melissa?
Yeah, that's what school's for, is to teach them, math and English and all that other good stuff. So that's what
Yeah.
school's for.
Yeah.
I understand that a lot of things come upon your responsibilities because there are unfortunately kids that have needs. But
Sorry, I'm going to
number
mute
one
myself
for
really quick for the
schools
basket hound.
is to teach them. Yeah. So that's my number one.
Sorry, I told you I have 2 basset hounds, y'all, and I love them dearly. And they have a job at my house because I'm an avid gardener and they keep the rabbits out of my gardens. But they are also very loud. If you've ever heard a basset hound bay, they're loud. But they're also the sweetest dogs ever. So we love them. So yeah, just an interesting to me as a person that looks at like what folks prioritize. Sometimes I think what community members actually say they prioritize when when it's just them. Sometimes it's counterintuitive to the narrative that folks craft, I think. So why do school board elections matter? Why are we all here? And that is very simply because school boards make decisions about the budget. They make they make decisions about school discipline, the school discipline policies, the strategic direction, and much more. Again, as a labor partner, they're the people who negotiate with the folks who work with our kids and set the standards for them. So I think that that's, always important that we think about what the role of a school board member actually is. Obviously, they cannot themselves solve the $4.5 billion deficit that our state, or not deficit, but the $4.5 billion underfunding that our state is doing. That's not in their purview. That's not, they don't have the power to do that. That's where we all come in. But I firmly believe that they do have enough power to make some change to the day-to-day that our kids are experiencing in school. And so what's at stake in public education? And what's at stake in this election for public education? Students continue to struggle with academic and social emotional needs. Mental health numbers for our students continue to decline. I don't know if you all saw, there was a study that came out that Michigan was like 41 out of 50 for overall child well-being. And some of that has to do with our literacy rates, as well as our physical health care and mental health care that we provide our students. And again, I look at the education that I received and where Michigan was in the national standings when I graduated. And it's pretty sad to see the decline that has happened. And a lot of that has been exacerbated by the learning loss experienced during the pandemic. Despite soaring needs, our schools have too few people and too few financial resources to respond to this need. We just talked about mental health and all of those things. And the families that are most impacted by inequities are often not a part of the decision-making. So one of the questions, I'll just give the candidates a head up. One of the questions is, how do they see themselves including the community and parents in their board decision-making? So with that, I see 1, 2, 3 candidates that are here this evening. And I'm gonna start with Lou because you're the first person I see on my screen. I'm gonna give you all 2 minutes to introduce yourselves. Introduce yourself and why you're running for the Chippewa Valley Schools Board of Education. You get 2 minutes. And Lou, so I'll give you a second to get off mute there if you want. Go ahead and introduce yourself, Lou.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Lou Miles, running for Board of Education, obviously. I'm a 20-ish year resident in Macomb County, moved to Chippewa Valley. I've had, I don't know, probably, 11, 12 years ago. I've had 2 daughters graduate from Chippewa Valley High School. My other daughter just graduated this past year from Dakota. So that's 3 kids graduated from the district. I've got grandkids coming up in the district. I decided to run for the board. Well, I ran in 2022, but I'm running again now because there are a great deal of problems. There's, like what you said with the underfunding, that's huge. There's hundreds of millions of dollars that funnel through this school district. Actually, last funds approved since January 2023, $414,955,105.45. So that's, to have that much money funneling through this district and have your teacher send a note home with the student asking for things in the classroom is unacceptable. We need to fund the classrooms first, then worry about administration and everything else. You know, we have to stop hiring administrators and start putting the money where it belongs, in the classroom, on the buses, in the lunchroom, with the parapros, all the people that make things happen in the district. That's where the money needs to go, not to the most recent hiring we've had here in the district, a director of auxiliary services, a spot that's been vacant for almost 18 years. So why do we need it? We've been getting along fine without it. Now we're going to take, maybe $150,000, $200,000 salary a year. Our superintendent makes just shy of $400,000 a year. Yet we have a median proficiency rate of, I believe it's around 37%. Now, any other person that has that kind of track record that's in an administrative or managerial position gets fired. So there's a lot of issues here in this district, and it's going to take some serious people to fix them. And I'm ready to step in and be that serious person. So thank you very much, everyone, for attending. It's great to be here. Thank you for the invite, and I look forward to answering as many questions as possible.
Thanks, Lou. And the next person on my screen, again, I'm just going in the order that you're in, is it Talitha?
Yes,
Talitha.
it is. Hi, how are you? Hi, my name is Talitha Mahome. Little background about myself. I grew up with 2 parents in the military, so moved around a lot before settling down in Michigan back in 2003. I graduated from Stevenson High School, where my brothers also graduated as well from there. I went on to attend Davenport University and got my bachelor's degree in paralegal studies. And then I went to law school at University of Toledo and got my law degree. After law school, I went and started working at the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office, where I worked for several years prosecuting felony cases in the general trial courtroom. And now I work in civil litigation, doing insurance defense for a law firm out in Farmington Hills. Um, yes, that's my current job. I am married. I have two beautiful girls. My oldest is in first grade in the district. And um, why I'm running is because of my kids. My kids are in the district. They're young. I'm going to be in the district for a long time, and I want to make sure that the decisions that are being made are putting the children first. And that's a little bit about me.
Thanks, Talitha. And last but not least, unless there's some candidates hiding out that I don't know about, is Don. Hi,
Yes,
Don.
hello. My name's Don Kuntz. Hello, everyone. And if there's people in here from our district listening, that many may already know me. I I retired from Dakota as a teacher. That's one of our schools. And I taught there for 25 years. I grew up in Fraser, so I've lived my whole life in Macomb County. I grew up in Fraser. Graduated from Fraser High School and went into the Marine Corps and served in the United States Marine Corps from 83 to 89, including my reserve time. And when I got out, I actually got a degree in architecture and worked as an architect for a short period of time, but switched over to financials, getting my S3 and S7 license and trading stocks and commodities for another couple of years. Was able to make enough money to open a store at Lakeside and ran that through my first lease. And when that lease came up, they wanted to double the rent. So I had to decide what I wanted to do when I grew up. And this is how my wife put it to me, at least. And I'd always wanted to teach. I always ended up a teacher. I was a primary marksmanship instructor in the Marine Corps. I was a sales instructor in the financial world. I have tended to just be that person who gravitated towards it. So I went back and got a degree in mathematics and secondary education, eventually getting a master's in educational leadership. From there, it's just been, I was lucky enough to get placed for my internship at Dakota High School and then got hired there and spent 25 years there. While I was there, I was in the math department. I taught mathematics. Everything from students that had recent struggles in math, all the way to the calc classes. I taught calculus 1 and 2, pre-calc, algebra, geometry, pretty much all of it. I was department chair. I lost count, but I think it was about 13, 14 years. I was department chair. I was the NCAA chairperson, which is our accreditation board chairperson, and did a lot of different, wore a lot of different hats while I was there. Was always really involved. I really felt invested in Dakota. In fact, I moved right next door the year I got hired and have lived next door to it for 26 years now. So I'm very much in the community. I've been in Chippewa Valley School community. I've been living here since '89. As soon as I got out of the Marine Corps, I moved into the district. Sorry about that. I don't know if you heard that call coming in. And then, so I have a big investment in this community. When I left, and while I was there, I was often, if you ask any of the school board members or people in administration, mostly administration, I was often in their office talking to them about ways we could improve, things we could do from the teacher's perspective. And that's kind of what led me to this point where I'm running for the school board. I had always had that interest in helping the district improve. I've written curriculum for the district. I've done a lot of different things voluntarily. So it wasn't a big step to when I heard there was an opening and for some of the teachers to reach out to me and say, well, you always said this. So it was kind of put up and shut up time. And so
You
I
got
had to,
voluntold, Don.
well, it was, I kind of, yeah, it was the Godfather thing. I was out for a year and I thought I was out. They dragged me back in. I couldn't say no. I really felt like this was something I had to do. And I really feel like in the early years I was in the district, we always had a teacher on the school board. And I think that teacher perspective is really important because we know sometimes we can save money. When you talk about funding, we can save money just by giving you a perspective about how that might work in the classroom, if it's realistic, or if we've already done that 3 times, because sometimes you have changeover in leadership and they don't know what we've done before. And so things like that, that continuity and that ability to give the teacher's perspective, I think is invaluable. I don't think you can operate without it. And I know the district does reach out for our opinions and such, but I don't think it's the same as having a voice on the board. And that is probably the one of the biggest things that drives me, is to represent my fellow teachers, and not just teachers, the employees of the district. I mean, when you're a teacher, as you said you were too, you live among them, and everybody in the building is critical. It's from every sub, every lunch lady, every hall monitor, every bus driver, and all those positions are critical to what we do. And so it's important to, I think, have that perspective of what the disruption is when you change it, make a half day or something like that. I think that perspective is incredibly important.
Thanks, Don. I want to thank you all for caring enough about our students to run for a Board of Education. I have been asked many times to run for a Board of Education or run for some office, and my answer is always no, thank you. I like being at home. So I always appreciate folks who want to serve our communities and especially our students and in any capacity. So thank you all, and thank you all for taking a time out of your evening to spend with us. So now we're going to start like the question part of the evening. And all of you will have the same questions. Will be in a random order of who goes first and who goes last. We ask that you keep your answer to 2 minutes or less. And I recognize that's kind of hard to do sometimes, but that way we can get everybody to bed on time. And I've been up since 4 a.m., so I would like to go to bed. So thank you all again. And our first question is going to go to Talitha first. And the question is, what are the steps that you would take to include and engage parents and caregivers in the budget in Chippewa Valley schools?
Can you hear me? I don't know if I took it off mute there.
You did.
Okay. Okay, so yeah, I think it's very important to have parent involvement in any decisions that are being made. I think that involving the community and parents in that process of the budget helps to create transparency and builds trust in the community and the parents. And so we do need avenues in order to have their input and contribute in that way. I think some of the ways that we can do that is ensuring that meetings are accessible and that parents are aware of the meetings so they can come and participate and engage in those conversations to give their feedback and suggestions in how the budgeting should look like, or different, I guess, ideas, things like that. Also, maybe having like surveys, a way for people to give their input outside of having to physically appear, because we all know that with working parents, there's time constraints, there's trying to get kids to bed on time, there's different things like that. So using online survey forums in order to get the parents' perspective and have that be something that's considered in the budget.
Go ahead.
Okay. No, that's fine.
Okay, that's good. Okay, thanks, Lou. So again, the question is, what are the steps that you would take to include and engage parents and caregivers in the budget of Chippewa Valley schools?
Well, for one thing, board meetings they're lacking, incredibly lacking. It's not a conversation. We need to open it up more like a town hall. You know, when you go to the board meeting with a question, you can't get an answer. You ask it till you're blue in the face, you don't get an answer. If you want to have a specific question answered, you have to FOIA that information. Then they take 10 days. Then they tell you that, you know, well, we need an extension. Then they take another 30 days to give you the answer. It's money and curriculum and everything else you should not have to FOIA that information. When you show up in a meeting, you should be able to ask the questions. Transparency is non-existent here. They don't tell you. They don't feel like they have to tell you. They are elected by the people for the people. They swear an oath under the Constitution. They need to answer to the people. So if the people have questions and concerns, they need to be addressed, not with a FOIA, not with, well, write your question down and we'll send you an email back. No, the way you get real answers to real questions is putting people on the spot and making them accountable for their actions. That's what it takes. Now, how do you engage this? Once you start getting the word out that you can actually get your questions answered, I believe people will come because they'll know that it's, you know, it's time to put up or shut up, right? You're going to come, you're going to get your questions answered. And if not, we will do our best to get back to you with those answers. So I don't know where my time's at, but that's kind of what I believe. They have to answer to the people, and they have not been for several years. I've been going to meetings for probably 4 years or so now, and it's ridiculous. It's a travesty. So again, I don't know where my time's at, so I'll just leave it with that.
Sorry, I muted myself because the dogs were being crazy again. Yep, you ran right to the exact 2 minutes, Lou. Thank you. Don, again, the question is, what are the steps you would take to include and engage parents and caregivers in your school district budgets?
All right. You know, the budget is huge. It's a big task, and it's something that is so much multifaceted. I think a single meeting is almost impossible to do. I think you have to engage in a lot of different modern conventions, I guess. We have the ability online to reach out to all our parents. There's no way we could have a meeting that would include the parents that want to come in. There's no building big enough in the district. It's important to have that forum. And so I think what we're doing here, you could have online forums easy enough, even once a month, to have any kind of online forum that would at least allow people to, if not engage, because going back and forth again with a district this size could take hours, but could at least leave comments, leave feedback, leave and have some key leading questions, because that's what it comes down to. Oh, hello.
I'll mute Beth.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Go
ahead.
Yeah, I think, you know, using the online ability to gather information and for one, like maybe narrow it down to a key issue at a time. If we're at a crux in our decision making between two options for the district, put out a poll, a survey to every parent, have them sign up for that service and make that the forum, because I think it's just not practical on the large scale to have everyone give and take. It just, you would never get out of there. It's better to be able to gather that data, gather the information, and take into account those opinions, take into account what's going on out there, what's going on in the homes, and have some good pointed questions. That takes time and takes effort, but I think it's an effort that would be well placed. I think that data could become very helpful when you're sitting there at the table trying to figure out, what do we do with this?
Thanks. Just when you say data, I have a sticker. I have a lot of stickers in my file cabinet, but just so y'all know who I am, I have a sticker at my file cabinet that says opinions only exist because of a lack of data. We love
There
data.
you go. As the math person, I love data.
We love data. So Don, since you answered last this time, you're going to be up first. What should be your school's top spending priorities in the budget? What do you think this should be the top spending priorities in its budget? And alternatively, what do you think should not be prioritized? And again, 2-minute answers, folks.
I think the best, the first thing that comes to mind with me right now, having been part of the hiring process and looking at knowing our shortage in subs and bus drivers and everything else, is putting money towards improving that, being able to hire employees. We got to put better money into employees. We got to be able to draw people, good people into this district to work. We've got a lot of great people right now that are just doing too much because we don't have enough to help them. And that's from everything. That's not just teachers, that's bus drivers, that's the lunchroom, it's everything in the buildings. So I think that's the biggest priority is we got to put it into that, because every bit of data tells us the most important thing in a school are the people. They have the biggest effect on kids learning. And so we've got to start there. The least important, God, it's so hard to, there's so little, as Chippewa Valley is the least funded school, the most underfunded school in the entire state. So it's hard to say we could ignore anything. I think, but gosh, that's a big question. I would say, I don't know if there's anything you can not prioritize. Every single piece is a piece of that puzzle. I don't think you can ever say, well, we don't need that. If there's, I just can't come up with anything that I can say we could cut on.
That's an acceptable answer too, Don. Okay, Talitha, again, the question is, what should be your school's top spending priority in its budget? And alternatively, what would you not prioritize in the school district budget?
Just to kind of hit on something different from Donna, because I do agree that the teacher salaries, support staff, things of that nature are very important. But to kind of touch on something different, I think that the support services for students is very important, whether that be mental health and counseling services, special education services and intervention programs, I think are important in order to help the children's emotional and behavioral needs. I think that's something that needs to be focused on. And like Don, I have a hard time thinking of, what's not important or what's least important, because there's just so many things that could be addressed and needs to be addressed in our district. But I have a hard time with that one as well.
Thanks, Talitha. And last but certainly not least, Lou, to repeat the question, what should be your school district's top spending priority? And or alternatively, what should not be prioritized in the budget?
All right, well, I would kind of agree, the staff, our staff is the most important thing. We entrust our children to the staff at our schools for, 6 to 8 hours a day, so they need, I don't want the cheapest person, right? You get what you pay for. If you call a plumber, do you pay your plumber $10 an hour or do you pay him $30 an hour, right? What are you going to get for $10 an hour? What are you going to get for $30 an hour? There's a huge difference. Our bus drivers right now, the average around the surrounding districts is like $23.72 an hour. Our drivers make $20.75. That can't be. Staff is important. The SAC program, you know how many times the SAC program was not funded and they had to shut it down? It's unheard of. I mean, again, with all the money in this district, your staff is number one. Fund the classrooms. As far as least prioritized, you can't say, well, this isn't important. Everything in this district is important and everything needs to be budgeted. You want to short some money? Short the superintendent's salary or the 8 other assistant superintendents. Or, this director of auxiliary services. What do these people do? For the results we're getting from them, they're not worth the money. So you want to start cutting stuff, start cutting from the top. You want to prioritize money, take some of theirs. Maybe you give them a raise based on merit, just like all the teachers get raises, right? Based on merit. What did you do? Did you pass your evaluation? You know what I mean? So you want to cut stuff, cut from the top. You can't cut from the bottom. It doesn't work. It'll never work.
Thanks, Lou. So the next question, I appreciate all of your thoughtful answers. I'm very excited to hear your answers as well. But the next question is, what do you think Chippewa Valley schools should do to address social emotional learning and mental health for its students? And Lou, you're up first.
Well, this is where a lot of us are going to disagree, and this is going to be a not. This is going to put me in a not very popular light. I do not agree with social emotional learning. I don't think it has any place in the classroom. I don't think it has any place in curriculum. Our schools are there to teach reading, writing, arithmetic. How many kids know the 3 branches of government? Why don't we teach that? Why do we focus on how you feel? What subject is that under? It's not. Keep the social emotional stuff at the home with the family. That's where that needs to be nurtured, not in the school. That's not the place for it. The school is to teach the kids what they need to know knowledge wise, not emotionally, knowledge wise. The emotional thing they get on their own and through their parents and churches and whatever other social activities they have. School is not a social activity. It's a place to learn. It's a place where you learn the knowledge skills that you need to get through this life. So social emotional learning, I disagree with. I will always disagree with it. Again, it's going to make me very unpopular, but that's how I feel. There is no place for it in school. I'm sorry.
Thanks, Lou. Let's go with Don. Again, the question is, how do you think Chippewa Valley Schools should address social emotional learning and mental health for its students?
Well, it's got to be a priority. Like everything is a priority, as we just mentioned with the budgeting issue. But social emotional learning and the mental health of our students, we know we have enough data again now that shows that a student that maybe doesn't have this is kind of an equity issue. There are students that don't have things at home, that don't have the right, whether it's the mental atmosphere or physical atmosphere, um, that's conducive to learning at any point, and it literally lowers their IQ. We have data that shows this, that if they are in an environment that they cannot relax in, or I shouldn't say relax, that may not be the best word. If they can't function at an optimal level, they're not going to learn. And so we have to take care of that piece. And it's something that's just now starting to get a lot of the data behind it. But we every bit that we get from every new study shows that we are way understaffed in terms of mental health resources, so that we can get to these kids before we end up with these, horrible incidences of violence and just things. We're losing kids to all these other issues. And I know it's great to say the home can provide these things, but some people don't have that. And so we have to be able to take that chunk. We've got to take that responsibility, because we can't teach them until we get them in a right mental space to do that. And so I think it's something that I don't think we're alone as a district, but I think every district is just now finding out that we've got to get more mental health professionals in the building, that we've got to have more one-on-one contact. I know at one point, I know it's better now, but at one point we had 600 students per counselor. And that's tough for them to think of. How many people can they see a day just to check in and see how that kid's doing? Those things are important. I think they're important to get to those kids before we lose them, before they stop showing up, before they take matters into their own hand in other ways. So I feel like it's got to become a bigger priority, and we've got to figure out how to ingrain it in our system. Because that's the other part, is I think we have a lot of that data that says we need this stuff, but we don't know exactly how to implement it yet. And I think that's where the implementation of that, how do we get kids that one-on-one contact that keeps them engaged, keeps them learning, keeps them in a space that they can do that. So I think that's the big challenge. I don't know if I'm exactly answering what you asked, but it's just what came to mind.
Thanks, Don. And Talitha, again, the question is, how do you think Chippewa Valley Schools should address social emotional learning and mental health with its students?
I think that social emotional learning is very important as well. I think that it helps with the regulation of the kids' emotions, so that they can go out into the world and be productive members of society. They're dealing with real life issues while they're in school, even though it might not, you know, be school might not be for specific a social event, but it is a social event. You're going every day to and from school, socializing with other people. And I think that focusing on social emotional learning helps kids be able to be more productive and be, I guess, a productive member of society once they get out of school. And how we do that, I think it's a hard thing to address, but you know, we address it by, like Don said, having those counselors available, having more mental health education. Um, we need to destigmatize the mental health issues and provide children with the tools that they need in order to succeed. Um, I'm trying to think of what else that hasn't been said already, but I do think that it's very important and that we do need to focus on it. And that's even with today's age of things going on in the schools, and we know that the bullying, the cyberbullying, everything like that. We need to just be able to be there to support the children that are there at school from 6 to 8 hours a day. Um, we just need to be able to support them in that way. I think that's important.
Thanks, Talitha. And this question is one that was submitted to me by community members. I want you to know that most of these questions are things that I've heard from folks talking in Chippewa Valley. So I didn't just pull these out of like the MEJC repertoire of questions that we have. I engage regularly with folks on the ground in the district. And like I said, I live here, so I know y'all. And the question is, as a school board member, how do you plan to combat the disinformation of commenters at Board of Education meetings? And so Talitha, you'll be up first.
I think it's just important to make sure that we're putting out information that is true and accurate. Um, Again, making sure that people are aware that the board meetings are public and that they're accessible online. And so you don't have to physically show up to a board meeting to have a presence and to be aware of what's going on. But you can engage online in order to understand the issues that are being presented. But I think as a school board member, it's important that we present the facts that we're able to present so that the community members are aware of it and so that that information can then be relied on by the community members.
Thank you so much. Lou, how do you plan to combat disinformation that happens at Board of Education meetings?
Well, for one thing, if you give people the proper information, there won't be disinformation. Truth always wins. Transparency always wins. The reason that there's so much disinformation now is because we have and I mentioned this at a speech at a board meeting, we have a very limited resource pool to pull from. We don't have, they just did an audit with Plant Moran. Plant Moran comes in, they get all this information to do this audit. When we look at stuff, we see one check register, a general check register. That's it. So we have to look at that, look at where that money goes, try to track it down, and then come to our own conclusions about how money is being spent and what's being done to combat certain issues, because we don't have all the information. So if you want to combat the misinformation, give people the information they need so that they won't have to come up with things on their own. It's cut and dried. You give people the tools they need and they will figure it out, and it'll make your job a lot easier.
Thanks, Lou. And Don, last but certainly not least, as a school board member, how would you help to combat disinformation at Board of Education meetings?
I think, again, it goes back to that earlier question about how do we engage with the community and find concerns and things of that sort. If in the same way that we could decide some issues, things we're batting around and trying to figure out what's the best way to go, we could also be answering questions. That's something that, again, the online world has allowed us to be able to take anything like that. If we feel there's disinformation out there, we should be able to have a board, a posting board, some kind of bulletin board online that can put the truth out there. As Lou said, that's always going to counter any kind of rumors is bald facts. And so we put the truth out there, which right now there is still a lot of information on the website, but some people may not be able to find it. Maybe there is a point where we could get to where we could be answering some of those questions and have a place to go and do that.
Thanks, Don. This one is going to be a hard one because we at MEJC have a platform that children have a right to learn. And part of the right to learn and the right to read comes up with this next question is, what do you know about the current process that the school district has for reviewing and challenging books? And do you support book bans? And Don, you're up first.
I honestly, my information is probably a little outdated. I know how we used to go through the book process. I've worked with English teachers in the building and such when they've wanted to have books, and there is a curricular process to get it added to any kind of curriculum. I believe that the same type of process is for our librarians, where they have to fill out the paperwork in order to go through the different channels to get access to those books or get those books in our buildings. I am not, again, part of that process is saying, is it appropriate for the curriculum, and is it going to achieve the desired end? That's always what we look at when we're looking at a book. So the idea of banning books, any books that I think anyone would reasonably ban, probably wouldn't have a place in the curriculum. But if they have a place in the curriculum, I don't see a reason that they should be banned. It's one of those things that I think the necessity of the information kind of trumps everything else.
Thanks, Don. Yep, go ahead.
That's it.
Okay, thanks, Don. All right, Lou, what do you know about the current process that your school district has to challenge books, and do you support book bans?
Well, first and foremost, no, I do not support book bans, even though I've been called a book banner many, many times on social media. I know the process very, very well because it was mostly created because of us. So I'm very familiar with it. It needs to go. We proposed a resolution. We submitted it to the board to have an opt-in program where you take all of the books that are in question. And a lot of these books, you're not talking Gone with the Wind or, Scarlet Letter or any books like that, Diary of Anne Frank. You're not talking books like that. You're talking books like Sold. You're talking books like, what is it? Identical. Books like that. I don't know if you're familiar with these books, but they are horrid. They have absolutely no business in a school, right? School kids do not need to be reading about a 7-year-old twin girl getting raped by her father while her sister watches. That does not have any place in school. However, if you feel that you want your child to read a book like that, all those books should be rounded up, put behind a curtain, put in a room. If you want your child in there, you can fill out a form and opt in. That was part of our resolution that we wrote and submitted to the board. They came up with the program where you have to opt your child out of reading a book. So if I wanted to do that, there's 400 and some odd books that we found so far that are in question. So I have to fill out a form and opt my child out of every book. Or I have to opt them out of the media center altogether. Now, we just spent $1 million renovating our media centers. So I have to opt my child out of enjoying what my tax dollars paid for. That's not right. So the system is broken. It needs to be fixed. They pulled this procedure right out of the ALA, and it's ridiculous. It's outdated. It doesn't need to be in place. A lot of parents don't even know what books are in the library. It's so hard to find things. Transparency, again, is non-existent. So how can you opt out of something that you don't even know is going on, right? Now, lately, there's been a lot of talk about it, but there's still, I would say, 3/4 of the district parents don't know what's going on with that. So it needs to change. That system is, you know, part of the program is having a child sit on the book review committee, but the child has to get permission from their parents to read the book. So if you have to get permission from your parents to read the book for a challenge committee, why don't you have to get permission from your parents to check a book out of the library? If you go into a rated R movie, they have to be accompanied by an adult under 17. If you get a video game that's rated MA, it's mature audiences only, right? Everything has ratings, music, all that. But yet our books are free for kids to walk in and just do what they as they please. It's not appropriate, and it needs to get changed.
Thanks, Lou. And Talitha, again, the question is, what do you know about the current process to ban books? And do you support book bans?
No, I don't support book bans. I think that banning books is a dangerous slippery slope where we are stifling creativity, we're stifling perspectives, and we need to be able to allow children to be able to engage in these different types of learning and education. Obviously, I believe that the book should be age appropriate for the children that are reading the books. I'm aware of the process of Chippewa Valley and what is needed in order to challenge a book and the opt out of those books. But I also think that, I mean, on one hand, we're asking parents to be involved in opting kids out of books, but on the other hand, we don't want parents involved in some of the school processes. I think it's just a back and forth that I think is getting lost. I think we should be having these books available for children, like I said, age appropriate books, and that if there's challenges to those books, you know, that's fine. But I don't support banning of books because I think that it provides a lot of education, history, and different viewpoints that is needed.
Thanks. We're at our last question of the evening, so we can all do a little dance, shake it off. I appreciate all of the thought that you all have put into your answers, and I appreciate the community members who joined us this evening. So yeah, go ahead, get a sip. The last question is, what else do you want voters to know about you and your priorities for public education? And so Talitha, you will be up first. What do you want voters to know about you and your priorities for public education?
I think it's just important to know that I have kids in the district as well. And so the decisions that are being made at the school board level are also affecting my children, my children's friends, things of that nature. And I will see the effects of those decisions in the years to come because my children are so young. And I think that's important. It's an important perspective. I also think the important perspective is having diversity on the school board and being able to represent those people who are underrepresented already. So having that perspective, having that viewpoint, I think is very important on a school board. And I hope that people take that into consideration.
Thank you so much. And Lou, what do you want people to know about you and your priorities for public education?
I would like to let everybody know that we need to appreciate the extras while getting back to the basics. Now, basics begin with safety. B, A, advocate for transportation excellence. S, student success. I, implementing accountability and budget transparency. C, communication. S, support for teachers and staff. So again, transparency. If you put me on the board as a community, if you put me on a board, you are going to get somebody that shows up, as I have been the past 4 years, that tries to hold people accountable for their actions, that's going to demand the answers that people need to know and that people want to know. Again, we work for the people. The superintendent works for the board. They hire, they fire him. The people elect the board. It is a privilege to sit on the board. So you need to answer to the people. I will do research like I have done tirelessly for the past 4 years. People don't know that because it gets shut down at board meetings, which again, it shouldn't. So these are things that I believe in, and these are things that I will try to bring to this district, and I will not stop until they achieve that goal. So that's me. Thank you much.
Thanks, Lou and Don. Again, the last question is, what do you want people to know about you and your priorities around public education?
Well, I think, first and foremost, just to say it again, I've worked for the district for 25 years. I've put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears over the years into trying to make this district the best it can be. And I want to continue that work basically on the board. I think a lot of the community already knows how much I put into it, how many hours after school and before school I've spent trying to help their students get through. It's very personal to me. I have a lot invested in the district as it is, and I want to continue that investment as a school board member. I think, again, if you haven't had one of your kids in my class, ask your neighbors. They probably have, and they'll tell you that what I say is what I am. I always am there for the kids. I always try to make decisions based on what's best for kids. And I want every kid in this district to have that opportunity to learn, to have that opportunity to be their best. I think we saw during COVID how much the school district or the school buildings are more than just buildings. They're part of the village, and they mean a lot to these kids.
Thanks, Lou, and thank you all again. Now we get to the point where I ask everyone here for something, and it's going to be something that I think is the most important thing that you all can do as parents and as community members, and that's vote and get your friends and family to vote, right? I want you all to go out tonight, and then within the next week, I want you to talk to at least one other person about the importance of voting and if they are registered to vote. And here's some important information about voting. Early voting in Michigan starts on October 26th. I know a lot of us who vote absentee, we already have our ballots. Mine is somewhere on my desk. And you can register to vote right on up until Election Day. And this address here, and I'll drop it in the chat, is how you find your clerk. And I'm going to drop it in the chat as soon as Zoom lets me move my screen around. So that's the most important ask that I can have for anybody is vote, and vote up and down the ballot. I don't want to see people in Macomb County just doing the partisan part of the ballots. I want you to vote in your school board elections, and flip the ballot is something that we like to say, flip your ballot, get to the other side, vote for all of the things. They're all important. And with that, the other ask that I have is, and again, if Zoom ever lets me get to the top of my screen, maybe I'll have to stop sharing and then I'll come back. I have to do that. This is the link for finding your polling place and finding your county or your city clerk. And this is our voter education justice voter pledge, saying that you pledge to be a voter that's going to vote down the ballot and even in those school districts and be an education justice voter. So I'm going to share my screen again because it has that fun little QR code where you can go to the link that's in the chat. Thank you all for coming this evening. And again, flip those ballots, be an education justice voter. Tomorrow, probably this will go up on the Michigan Education Justice Coalition YouTube page, and I will share it with all the folks who are here that if I have your email, so you can share this candidate forum with your friends and family, and maybe they can find, if they're not in Chippewa Valley Schools, a candidate forum near them. So thank you all for joining us this evening. Have fun. I'm letting y'all out early. I love when we end things earlier than I anticipated. So thank you so much for coming, and thank you to our candidates for taking the time to speak to the voters this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you again for putting it on and for community members that may have joined in. So thank everyone, and everyone have a good night.
Thank you all.
Thanks, you
Bye.
too.
Good
Yeah.
night. Figure out how to get out.